Welcome. Today, we're taking a detailed look at the story behind one of the key figures in modern American commerce.
We are. We're going to be focusing on Raymond Albert Kroc. He was born in 1902, passed away in 1984.
And he's the American businessman who, even though he wasn't the actual founder of McDonald's, was just absolutely instrumental in turning this tiny concept into the global fast food corporation that really defined the whole second half of the 20th century.
That's really the heart of our exploration. Kroc's story isn't just about successful entrepreneurship. It's a masterclass in aggressive scalability, relentless systemization, and to be frank, the kind of ruthless ambition that's often required to build an empire.
Right.
So by looking at the source material, we'll trace his path from this really diverse and often challenging early life all the way through his revolutionary approach to franchising to the very complex and contentious acquisition of the McDonald brothers' original concept.
We'll also get into his later life, right? His
Yeah.
ventures into baseball ownership and his family's huge philanthropic legacy.
Ab-
So our objective for you listening is to really grasp the mechanics of how he did it. We want to go beyond the simple story and understand how a man who was, struggling to sell milkshake mixers could identify a system in one California restaurant and then just transform it into an international powerhouse.
Yes, and crucially, we're going to spend a good amount of time analyzing the critical business and financial structures Kroc put in place. That's what allowed for such controlled, explosive growth.
We're really examining that transition, how he went from being this persistent sort of middle-aged salesman to the leader of a company with, system-wide sales over $8 billion by the time he died?
And his personal fortune was estimated at around $600 million. That kind of success, that magnitude, it really demands a detailed look at how the money was made and how control was maintained across thousands and thousands of locations.
That structural detail is what gets lost in the popular version of this story.
It often does.
Okay, let's unpack this entire journey, starting right at the beginning.
Right. So Ray Kroc was born on October 5, 1902 in Oak Park, Illinois.
Which is a suburb just outside Chicago.
Exactly. His heritage was Czech-American. His parents were Rosemary and Alois, or Louis Kroc. And Alois was an interesting figure himself. He had that entrepreneurial spirit. He successfully amassed a pretty considerable fortune, mostly through speculating on land during the boom of the 1920s.
But the sources seem to indicate that this early fortune was built on, shaky foundations. That must have had a huge impact on the young Ray.
Oh, it did. The entire fortune was wiped out in the 1929 stock market crash and, the Great Depression that followed.
Of course.
And witnessing that firsthand, this financial cataclysm, it undoubtedly instilled in Kroc a really deep-seated financial resilience. And maybe more importantly, a powerful aversion to relying on unstable investments or, outside forces.
It sounds like it cemented his belief in self-reliance and just aggressive hustle.
I think so. And that self-reliance really defined his youth. At just 15 years old, Kroc dropped out of high school.
Going against his parents' wishes.
Completely against their wishes.
Hmm.
And that early independence, it really sets the trajectory for a man who wasn't interested in a conventional education. He wanted practical experience.
And there's also a little historical footnote from World War I.
Yes, a fascinating one. He lied about his age to enlist with the American Red Cross. He wanted to be an ambulance driver. The war ended shortly after he enlisted, so his service was brief, but it reflects that eagerness to be involved, to be moving forward. It's a drive that really characterized his entire life.
After that, the period between the 1920s and the 1940s, it really shows Kroc's adaptability during the Depression. I mean, he bounced around a lot.
He was a true opportunist, holding a wildly diverse set of jobs. He spent time as a paper cup salesman. He worked as a Florida real estate agent, trying to capitalize on that boom-bust cycle in southern land.
He was even a pianist.
Yeah, playing in various bands just to earn a living. This period isn't just a list of jobs. It shows a profound willingness to pivot, to hustle, and to take whatever work was available, no matter how far it was from a stable career path.
So the job that really became the catalyst, the one that eventually led him to McDonald's that came after World War II, he settled on selling these multi-spindle milkshake mixers for a company called Gold Castle.
Which later became Prince Castle. And this is the critical prehistory. Kroc's livelihood was entirely dependent on the success of these mixers, but the market was shifting dramatically.
His sales were plummeting.
They were. He was facing intense, cheaper competition, particularly from the big manufacturer Hamilton Beach. He was a salesman fighting, really, a losing battle against technology and price.
Which means he was probably primed to notice, any kind of anomaly. And that anomaly showed up in 1954. He noticed an order that was so far outside the norm it practically screamed for attention.
It did. A single hamburger restaurant in San Bernardino, California, had purchased an unusually large order of 8 milkshake mixers.
8 for one location.
8 mixers for a single location was just unheard of. Most restaurants struggled to justify 2, maybe 3. So Kroc's curiosity wasn't just piqued. His livelihood depended on understanding why this one place needed so much volume. He decided to go visit the restaurant himself, which was owned by Richard and Maurice McDonald.
And when he got there, what did he see? I mean, beyond just the high volume of milkshakes?
He saw efficiency, he saw a system. He was immediately impressed not just by the number of customers, but by the, quote, efficiency and speed of the entire operation. This wasn't chaos. It was a tightly controlled production line.
And this was driven by the speedy service system the brothers had introduced back in 1948.
Exactly. It was a streamlined assembly line for preparing food.
So Kroc didn't see hamburgers. He saw a blueprint. He saw potential for industrial-level replication.
That's the perfect way to put it. He saw the structure, the engine, and the demand. So he convinced the McDonald brothers to let him franchise the concept nationally.
And the sources are clear. He started out as their franchising agent.
That's right. He was their agent first. Then, in 1955, he opened his own restaurant, which was actually McDonald's 9th overall in Des Plaines, Illinois. And that marks his immediate entry into corporate leadership. He served as company president from that year all the way to 1968.
Before we really get into the business model, we have to talk about the surprising intersection of 2 huge American icons, Kroc and Walt Disney.
It's a fantastic historical parallel. The sources confirm that Kroc and Disney had actually met decades earlier.
During World War I.
Yes, both serving as ambulance attendant trainees in Old Greenwich, Connecticut. They were contemporaries, part of that same generation of massive entrepreneurs.
And Kroc tried to leverage this connection. He wrote a letter to Disney proposing a McDonald's location inside the new Disney development, which of course was Disneyland.
And what happened next is where the story gets a little murky.
Right, the corporate mythology.
The standard, widely circulated tale suggests Disney agreed, but only on one condition: that Kroc would raise the price of fries from 10 cents to 15 cents, allowing Disney to pocket the 5-cent difference. The story goes that Kroc refused, unwilling to compromise on his low-price commitment to the customer.
Which led to Disneyland opening without a McDonald's.
That's the story. But historical accounts, particularly those cited by writer Eric Schlosser, view this version with a lot of skepticism. He suggests it's a doctored retelling that was later popularized by McDonald's executives.
So what's the more likely scenario?
According to some records, it's simply that the proposal was returned without approval. Just a simple no.
Well, regardless of the exact truth, I think the anecdote really highlights Kroc's fundamental commitment to low price points and consistency.
It does. He believed in providing maximum value to the customer, and that was just not negotiable for him. But that commitment to consistency also defined his revolutionary approach to franchising.
And this is where Kroc truly innovated. He set himself apart from basically every other business that was expanding at the time. Instead of selling these large, exclusive territorial licenses, which was standard practice,
he insisted on the single-store franchise model.
Which is the core of his strategic genius.
It absolutely is, and it really requires a detailed explanation. In the mid-20th century, most franchisors saw their business as a way to generate quick, large sums of cash. They'd sell huge territories, say the rights to all of New Jersey, to a single investor for a high upfront fee.
And Kroc realized that was a deeply flawed model for the long term.
Exactly. Why was it flawed? Because the franchisor, in this case, Kroc, would immediately lose all control. If the person running McDonald's of New Jersey decided to cut corners, use cheaper ingredients, or change the menu, Kroc had very little recourse without long, expensive legal battles.
It would ruin the brand consistency. And Kroc was obsessed with standardization.
Territorial licenses were standardization killers.
Yeah.
So by granting the right to only a single store location at a time, he retained maximum leverage.
So if a franchisee didn't strictly adhere to every single one of his operational rules,
they simply wouldn't be granted the rights to open the next location down the road. This was his enforcement mechanism. It ensured the system remained uniform across all locations, and it fulfilled his core contractual obligation to the McDonald brothers to maintain the integrity of their speedy service system.
But here's a critical question. If Kroc limited his upfront revenue by only selling these small single licenses, how did he generate the stable, large capital he needed for aggressive national expansion. I mean, he must have been cash-strapped in those early years.
That is the financial pivot that distinguishes McDonald's from every other restaurant. And this is where Harry Sunborn comes in, the man Kroc called his financial wizard.
Right.
Sunborn joined Kroc, and he recognized immediately that the franchise fees alone were not going to be enough to fund the kind of expansion Kroc was dreaming of.
So Sunborn changed the entire business model.
He did. He provided the foundational insight. McDonald's wasn't fundamentally a hamburger seller, it was a real estate company. His strategy involved McDonald's Corporation forming a separate company, Franchise Realty Corporation, to purchase and own the land that the restaurants were built on.
And then the franchisees would lease the land back from Kroc's company.
Precisely. McDonald's Corporation would buy the land or secure a long-term lease for the site, often in very desirable, high-traffic locations. They would then lease the land and the building to the franchisee.
And that lease was charged at a significant markup.
A huge markup, perhaps 20 to 40% higher than Kroc's own acquisition cost.
That's an enormous structural change. What did that achieve for Kroc?
Well, three things, almost instantly. First, it generated a stable, predictable, recurring revenue stream. The rent, which was far more reliable and much higher margin than the small 1.9% fee he got on food sales. Second, because McDonald's owned the real estate, it gave Kroc absolute non-negotiable control over the franchisee. If they failed to meet his standards, they weren't just losing a license, they were being evicted from Kroc's property.
And third?
The third thing was that owning massive amounts of prime real estate gave Kroc the collateral he needed to borrow the huge sums of money necessary for exponential national expansion.
So that's how he was able to scale without the big upfront capital from territorial licenses. He basically turned McDonald's into a landlord that leveraged its assets for growth capital.
It was a stroke of genius. It transformed Kroc's expansion ambitions into a viable, low-risk financial proposition for lenders. This stabilized his position, but it did nothing to smooth his relationship with the original founders.
And this is where the system met the founding vision and the friction just exploded.
Kroc's ambition for this exponential scale was just fundamentally incompatible with the McDonald brothers' desire for maintenance and stability. The sources show the brothers were quite happy to manage a small number of efficient restaurants. Their focus was on perfecting the existing system.
While Kroc wanted to conquer the country with it.
Exactly. And Kroc grew more and more frustrated because the brothers kept blocking his suggestions for expansion or modification. The sources reveal they insisted Kroc get formal legal letters for even minor changes to the original blueprint. They were sticking rigidly to the letter of their contract.
They were focused on quality control through stasis, while Kroc was focused on quality control through aggressive, exponential scale.
The tension was just unsustainable. And that led directly to the critical moment in 1961, the buyout.
Kroc moved to buy out the entire company. And when he pressed them for a price, the brothers settled on $2.7 million.
Which was an astronomical sum in 1961. The amount was so high that Kroc, even with the real estate revenues he was generating, reportedly went ballistic.
And the documentation suggests he asked if he could pay in installments.
He did, which is a clear indication of his own immediate cash flow crunch, despite the long-term profitability of the real estate scheme.
And the brothers, they flatly refused the idea of incremental payments. This meant Kroc had to find the full $2.7 million right away.
And he was already saddled with existing debt from the rapid expansion of the last 6 years. This is where Harry Sunborn proved his worth again. Sunborn was absolutely essential in leveraging the real estate assets and securing the required capital from institutional lenders to finalize that purchase.
Without Sunborn's financial architecture, the acquisition likely wouldn't have happened.
Very likely not.
We should take a moment here to express some sympathy for the brothers, Richard and Maurice. While $2.7 million sounds like a lot, they were essentially selling a concept that would quickly become one of the most valuable global brands in history for just a fraction of its eventual worth.
That disparity is, from a historical perspective, just heartbreaking. They created the system, but they lacked the vision, or maybe just the willingness, to pursue the financial structure and scale that Kroc imposed.
And the closing of the deal was anything but friendly. There was a major point of contention over the very first restaurant in San Bernardino.
A huge point of contention. Kroc became deeply annoyed because the brothers refused to transfer the real estate and the rights to that original location to him.
And their reason, according to the sources, was actually a rather touching gesture.
It was. They intended to give the original operation, property and all, to their founding employees as a final act of generosity.
Kroc's reaction to this was just fury. In anger, he later opened a brand new, massive McDonald's restaurant right near the original location.
And this is where the brothers' most significant business oversight really came into sharp focus. They had neglected to retain the rights to the name McDonald's for their original restaurant.
So they were forced to rename it the Big M.
They were, and Kroc was adamant about owning the name, famously believing that no one would want to eat at a restaurant called Kroc's.
It was a brutal piece of corporate competition. The nearby McDonald's, backed by Kroc's marketing and control, eventually drove the Big M to close entirely.
The founders of the entire system were essentially driven out of business by the man who industrialized their invention. It's a sad irony.
Especially when you consider the ongoing debate about royalties. There's an allegation that Kroc promised a continuation of the original 1% annual royalty to the brothers, based only on a handshake agreement during the buyout.
This is a widely publicized claim, especially since the movie The Founder came out. But what does the strict historical documentation show?
The record is clear on this. There is no evidence of this handshake agreement beyond a claim made by a nephew of the McDonald brothers years later. We have to be impartial and state that historically this remains an unverified claim.
But it does highlight the ruthlessness involved in acquiring total control. The brothers sold everything, including any future royalties, for that one cash lump sum.
And we should note, just for balance, that despite the dramatic end of their involvement, neither of the brothers publicly expressed lasting disappointment over the deal. Richard McDonald, speaking years later, reportedly said he had no regrets.
Whether they felt slighted or not, the reality is that Kroc now had total undisputed control. With Sunborn's real estate machine generating cash flow and the single-store franchise system ensuring compliance, Kroc's focus shifted entirely to scaling his standardized vision across the globe.
Let's turn to what Kroc mandated to ensure that this massive scale maintained absolute quality. He kept the foundation of the brothers' speedy service system for preparation.
He did, but Kroc added the operational rigor. His contribution was this intense focus on standardization, setting rules so strict they were almost obsessive. The goal was simple. Every single item, especially the hamburger, had to taste exactly the same in every single restaurant, whether you were in Illinois, California, or eventually Tokyo.
This required intense operational mandates covering every micro detail of the operation.
Oh, yes. We're talking about rules that dictated specific portion sizes, exact cooking methods, precise cooking times, down to the second and standardized packaging. Kroc's system was designed to remove human error and subjectivity completely.
He even mandated that franchisees use specific brands of equipment and vetted suppliers.
All to ensure consistency. And he was adamant about quality control, even rejecting cost-cutting measures that were becoming common in the industry at the time.
The source material specifically points out his prohibition on using soybean filler in the hamburger patties.
Right. Other fast food places were experimenting with fillers to lower costs, but Kroc rejected this entirely. He wanted to ensure the meat quality remained consistent. This focus on consistency, even when it meant a higher cost, was the bedrock of building customer trust.
And these strict rules went well beyond the kitchen, didn't they? They moved into customer service and front-of-house operations.
Absolutely. Kroc imposed mandates for rapid service and accuracy. He demanded that money be refunded to customers if orders were incorrect.
And he set a strict mandate. Refunds were to be given to any customer who had to wait more than 5 minutes for their food.
Which was a revolutionary promise of speed and efficiency for that era.
This required a managerial mindset that demanded constant productivity. Kroc introduced a famous managerial catchphrase in the 1960s that has since become synonymous with managerial rigor across multiple industries.
If you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean.
Exactly.
That phrase perfectly summarizes the corporate culture Kroc enforced. A relentless, non-stop work ethic. The sources confirm this catchphrase has been widely adopted by managers far outside the food service industry, which just illustrates how pervasive Kroc's influence on American labor management truly became.
He fostered a culture where efficiency was paramount and downtime was unacceptable.
And that rigor, combined with the financial security of the real estate model, propelled the company to immense success. Kroc served as chairman of the board from 1968 to 1977, and then as senior chairman until his death.
The scale is what's truly mind-boggling here. By the time Kroc passed away in January 1984, McDonald's had reached 7,500 outlets in the U.S. alone.
And had expanded into 31 other countries and territories worldwide. Total system-wide sales in 1983 were over $8 billion. Kroc didn't just scale a business, he fundamentally defined how large-scale, standardized food consumption operates globally.
By 1973, with the McDonald's machine running pretty much on its own, Kroc decided to retire from day-to-day operations and find new passions. He returned to his lifelong favorite sport, baseball.
He was a dedicated fan, and a fascinating moment occurred when, while he was on vacation, he read in the newspaper that the San Diego Padres were for sale. And crucially, they had been conditionally sold to a D.C. grocery chain owner who planned to move the team out of San Diego.
So Kroc stepped in, driven by a mix of fandom and civic pride, and he bought the team for $12 million, keeping them in San Diego.
And even though the team was terrible, they lost 102 games in his first year of ownership in 1974. Kroc's presence was a huge boon for the fans. They drew over 1 million in attendance, which at the time was a key benchmark for Major League success. The local media loved him for it.
But Kroc couldn't turn off that operational zeal he had perfected at McDonald's. He became known as a highly vocal and often explosive owner.
The quintessential moment of his ownership came during the season opener on April 9, 1974. The Padres were losing badly to the Houston Astros in front of a massive crowd, almost 40,000 fans. And Kroc, completely frustrated with the poor play, did something unprecedented.
He grabbed the public address microphone.
He did, and he didn't mince words. He declared publicly, "I've never seen such stupid ball playing in my life." And the sources say the crowd, sharing his frustration, just erupted in cheers of approval.
It was a spectacular, very public display of a frustrated businessman trying to apply his demanding system to the chaotic world of professional sports.
His enthusiasm, or maybe his willingness to apply his business mindset to team building, eventually got him into official trouble with the league.
Yes, in 1979, Kroc publicly expressed interest in acquiring future free agents, specifically mentioning stars Greg Nettles and Joe Morgan.
Which is a violation of the rules against tampering with players still under contract. Commissioner Bowie Kuhn took swift action and issued a massive $100,000 fine.
And that fine seems to have been the breaking point for Kroc.
It was. Frustrated by the bureaucratic constraints and the league's rules that prevented him from using his usual aggressive strategies, Kroc handed over operations of the team to his stepson-in-law, Ballard Smith. His quote, summarizing his exit, was perfect. "There's more future in hamburgers than baseball."
But despite the drama and the fines, his impact on San Diego baseball was ultimately positive. In 1984, the year he died, the Padres honored him by wearing a special patch with his initials, RAK.
And that was the year they went on to win the National League pennant. Kroc was eventually inducted into the Padres Hall of Fame in 1999.
Moving from sports to politics. The source material identifies Kroc as a lifelong, staunch Republican with deeply held conservative views.
His political philosophy was really rooted in that self-reliance he learned during the Great Depression. He was a firm believer in minimal government intervention and a staunch opponent of government welfare programs and New Deal-era policies.
His political involvement reached its most controversial point in 1972. Kroc donated a huge sum, $255,000, to Richard Nixon's re-election campaign.
And this donation immediately became a source of significant controversy.
Specifically, figures like Senator Harrison Williams suggested that the donation wasn't just an act of political support, but was intended to influence the administration.
The accusation was that the money was meant to sway Nixon to veto a minimum wage bill that was then going through Congress. This link between a massive political donation and lobbying against a wage increase made the controversy front-page news. We report impartially that these accusations were a significant part of Kroc's political legacy at the time.
Yet, despite the aggressive business tactics and controversial political donations, Kroc's legacy is also deeply rooted in philanthropy and his commitment to health.
It's a study in contradictions. The Kroc Foundation, which he established, focused on supporting research, treatment, and education for a range of medical conditions, including alcoholism, diabetes, arthritis, and multiple sclerosis.
But he is recognized globally for one specific organization that came from his commitment to community, the Ronald McDonald House.
Yes, this is perhaps the most enduring and positive aspect of his name recognition outside of the food industry. The Ronald McDonald House is a nonprofit that provides free housing for parents, allowing them to stay close to medical facilities while their children receive crucial, often long-term treatment.
It's a profoundly important organization that came from his amassed fortune.
It is. Now, Kroc's personal life involved 3 marriages. His first, to Ethel Fleming, lasted from 1922 to 1961. Then he had a brief second marriage to Jane Dobbins Green.
His third marriage was perhaps the most consequential for his legacy. He married Joan Smith, who became Joan Kroc in 1969, and they were together until he died.
And Joan Kroc became an equally significant, though very different philanthropist in her own right after his passing.
While Ray focused on community and health, Joan dedicated her philanthropy to major global causes, notably the promotion of peace and efforts to prevent nuclear proliferation.
Her final acts of generosity were truly staggering. When Joan died in 2003, her entire remaining estate, valued at $2.7 billion, was distributed among various nonprofit organizations according to her wishes.
This included a monumental $1.5 billion donation to the Salvation Army.
A donation that was specifically designated to build 26 Kroc centers across the country, focusing on serving socially deprived neighborhoods with comprehensive community facilities.
And she also made a very notable $200 million donation to National Public Radio,
reflecting her deep personal belief in the importance and power of public radio and independent journalism.
It's an extraordinary final chapter. A fortune built on standardization, aggressive expansion, and the financial architecture of real estate, ultimately deployed globally for massive social good by his widow.
The tension between the business methods used to acquire the fortune and the moral use of that fortune afterwards provides a profound context for his entire story.
And given the outsized impact Kroc had on global business and culture, it's really no surprise his story has been frequently depicted in modern media.
Kroc co-authored the book Grinding It Out, The Making of McDonald's, which was first published in 1977, and then reissued just before the release of the major biographical film based on his life.
That film was The Founder in 2016, starring Michael Keaton as Kroc. And that film really popularized the story of Kroc's relentless expansion and his eventual acquisition. Importantly, it offered a critical and somewhat unsympathetic view of his treatment of the founding McDonald brothers.
It brought that entire contentious buyout back into the mainstream public discourse.
His business methods have even entered the world of music.
Right. Kroc's aggressive, rapid business tactics are the subject of Mark Knopfler's 2004 song Boom Like That, which explicitly references the speed and ruthlessness of his corporate strategy.
He's also featured frequently in documentaries and educational programs like the BBC World Service show 50 Things That Made the Modern Economy. His influence as a structural innovator is just undeniable.
And finally, we should note his concluding years. In 1980, after a stroke, Kroc entered an alcohol rehabilitation facility.
He passed away 4 years later, succumbing to heart failure on January 14, 1984 in San Diego. He was 81, and he left behind one of the most transformative legacies in global business history.
So as we bring this exploration to a close, what really stands out most from the sources about the enduring core of his business strategy?
I think it's the sheer organizational genius of marrying two concepts that seem separate: control and growth. Kroc realized that exponential growth was only possible if it was perfectly controlled. His structure, the single-store franchise model, combined with his unrelenting enforcement of standardization, that was the mechanism. He didn't just sell licenses, he sold an ironclad system.
And that system was crucially funded by the real estate strategy devised by Sanborn. Kroc's success wasn't dependent on the volatile profits from burgers. It was dependent on the stable, recurring, leverageable income from land ownership and rental fees. He wasn't primarily a restaurateur. He was a master property developer and system administrator.
His story presents a critical tension for anyone interested in scale and entrepreneurship. Ray Kroc embodied the vision required for aggressive global expansion and the organizational rigor needed to make that standardization effective across 7,500 outlets.
Yet, the story is inseparable from the human cost of that scale, most notably the contentious methods used to acquire the founding brothers' system and name.
It forces us to ask a profound question about capitalism and legacy, which is something for you to consider. The McDonald brothers received $2.7 million for their invention, which became the standard for global fast food. Kroc's widow, Joan, ultimately dedicated her life to peace and social causes, distributing $2.7 billion from that very fortune.
So does the immense, enduring social legacy created by Joan Kroc's philanthropy ultimately recontextualize the controversial and aggressive methods Ray Kroc used to acquire the founding invention. It shows the complex, often morally ambiguous path between invention, acquisition, and eventual public good.
The ultimate lesson of Kroc is that success often hinges not on invention, but on the aggressive, controlled, and financially savvy industrialization of that invention. He was the architect of modern franchise replication.
I agree. He demonstrated that the system, not the product, is the true engine of sustained global commerce.
Thanks for listening.